Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the Unnao case. Now, this is a story that's so much more than just a single crime. It's really a saga. It's about a years-long battle against some serious political power, and it makes you question the very systems that are supposed to protect us.
So, why are we talking about this now? Well, the whole thing is back in the news because of this huge ruling from the Supreme Court. They basically called the lower court's decision a mistake. A mistake. So you have to ask, right? How did a story about local power and political connections blow up to the point where the highest court in the entire country had to step in? Let's trace it back.
Okay, so to really get the full picture here, we're going to start with that controversial bail decision that kicked off this whole new chapter. Then we'll jump back, way back, like 2 decades, to see the political feud that really set the stage for everything. And then we'll follow the incredible, difficult path that led this victim's family all the way to the Supreme Court.
All right, let's kick things off with the event that really threw this case back into the spotlight. We're talking about a super controversial bail hearing at the Delhi High Court on December 23rd, 2025.
Okay, so the High Court's decision, it all boiled down to one single, really critical interpretation of the law. They argued that under the POSCO Act, the law that's meant to protect children, an MLA like Sengar doesn't count as a public servant. Now, that might sound like just legal jargon, but it was everything. Why? Because that distinction dropped his minimum sentence from 20 years all the way down to just 7. And since he'd already served that time, well, that was his ticket to getting out on bail. But, to really understand the power dynamics that were going on here, we have to rewind. We have to go back way further, because this wasn't just some random legal case. It was really the explosive end to a political alliance that had turned sour years and years earlier. Believe it or not, back in 2002, the victim's family and Kuldeep Singh Sengar were actually political allies. The family had some real influence locally, and they helped him win his very first election. But as soon as he got into power, Sengar started to distance himself. The real breaking point, though, it was a local village head election. The victim's uncle was counting on Sengar's support, but instead, Sengar put his own mother up for the spot. And that one political move, it shattered the alliance and really planted the seeds for a terrible, terrible conflict. So that broken political alliance, it set the stage for something much, much darker. In June of 2017, this whole thing went from being just a political fight to a criminal investigation, one that was immediately bogged down by some really serious allegations of a cover-up. So on June 4th, 2017, the conflict took this absolutely horrific turn. A minor girl from the family accused MLA Sengar of rape. But what happened next was just a series of roadblocks. The victim goes missing. When she's found, the MLA's name, nowhere to be found in the police report. It actually took the family 8 whole months and a direct petition to the court just to get an official complaint and FIR filed against this powerful sitting politician. Think about that. But getting that case filed, that was only the very beginning of their fight. As the family kept pushing, the attempts to silence them allegedly got worse, escalating from just blocking the investigation to deadly violence. Now, this is where the story takes an even more tragic turn. Just look at this chain of events. On April 3rd, the victim's father is brutally beaten in public, allegedly by the MLA's brother and his crew. Then, he's handed over to the police, but instead of helping him, the police file a case against him, supposedly using a weapon that was planted on him. He's in severe pain from the beating, but somehow he's declared medically fit and thrown in jail. And the very next day, he dies. The whole sequence just points to this total, systematic failure of both the police and the medical systems.
And here is the key piece of evidence that just blows the official story apart. The post-mortem report was crystal clear. He died from a ruptured intestine, an injury he got from the beating. This medical fact completely contradicts that fit-for-jail report, and it suggests a catastrophic and fatal failure to give him medical care when he desperately needed it.
So, her father was dead. The legal system seemed like a brick wall. Facing what must have felt like a complete institutional shutdown, the victim did something desperate, something shocking, something that would finally make the entire country pay attention. On April 8th, just a few days after her father died in custody, she went to the chief minister's official residence and tried to set herself on fire. This absolutely shocking act of desperation, it was a final, horrifying scream for help, a plea for someone, anyone, to finally listen to her. And that is what it took. That act of desperation brought the national media flooding into Unnao, and suddenly things started to happen, and happened fast. 6 police officers were suspended, Sengar's brother was arrested, the case was yanked from the local police and handed over to the CBI, and then finally, the Allahabad High Court ordered the arrest of Kuldeep Singh Sengar himself. It's incredible, right? The system that had been completely stuck for almost a year suddenly started moving.
So this entire tragic history, all of it, from the political falling out to the public outcry, that's the backdrop. That's what led us back to where we started, the Supreme Court's landmark decision.
And here you can just see the two legal arguments, side by side. It's so clear. The Delhi High Court's whole ruling was built on this idea that an MLA is not a public servant under this specific child protection law. That made the minimum sentence just 7 years. But the Supreme Court, they just flat out rejected that. They said, no, legislators are public servants. And with that one change in definition, boom, the minimum sentence shoots up to 20 years, and it completely changes the entire game. It all came down to that one question: who should the law hold to a higher standard?
What the Supreme Court basically did was reaffirm the whole point of this law. They said the intent of this specific provision is to hold people in positions of power, we're talking police, teachers, and yes, politicians, to a much higher standard. The law is specifically written to give extra protection to kids from the very people who are supposed to be in positions of public trust.
So, the Supreme Court's decision, it's a huge legal victory for sure, but the journey to get there tells a really sobering story, doesn't it? From a broken political promise, to a father's death, to a desperate plea for help in the nation's capital, this case just shows that the path to justice is almost never a straight line. And it leaves us with this really fundamental question. When the system itself seems to be the obstacle, what does it truly take for the voices of the most vulnerable to finally be heard?